Hello and welcome to this episode of the Manifestation Method podcast. We are going to dive into a topic that I think really touches every single one of us at the deepest level, and that is the wound of belonging. Now, this isn't just about whether you felt accepted in high school or about those moments when you feel a little out of place inside of a social circle. The belonging wound goes so much deeper than that. It actually lives in the very fabric of what it means to be a soul in a human body, needing to navigate separation, longing, and ultimately the ache to return to connection. It's the deep primal need to be seen, to be accepted, to be chosen, to be loved. And when that need is not met, something happens inside of our system. The mind starts spinning stories. The inner opponent begins its whispers. So you walk into a room and suddenly you're convinced, I don't fit in. No one here wants to talk to me. Something must be wrong with me. And before you know it, belonging becomes not just a wound, but a lens you see yourself through. Does this sound familiar? That's because this is not just your wound. It's a collective wound. Every single one of us carries some version of it. So where does this wound come from? Why does it feel so alive in us? How does it shape the way we show up in relationships, communities, and even with ourselves? And most importantly, how do we begin to heal it? And that's exactly what we're going to be exploring today. And along the way, I'll be weaving in Kabbalistic wisdom and shamanic perspectives to show you that this wound is not just psychological, but rather profoundly spiritual. So this episode is going to be so relatable, or at least that's my hope. You're going to see yourself in it, and it is just so juicy. So let's get into it. Becoming a co-creator with the creator is your birthright. Together, we'll journey into your deepest authenticity. Because the more you align with who you truly are, the more effortlessly you call in the life that you desire and deserve. And most importantly, the more you step into your soul's highest purpose. Welcome to the Manifestation Method podcast, your number one source for Kabbalistic manifestation. Here we combine the ancient wisdom of Kabbalah, modern psychology, and quantum physics to help you achieve real, tangible manifestation results with my proven Abra method. I'm Ayelet Polonsky, and I'm here to guide you on your journey of manifesting a life that is aligned, expansive, and deeply connected to your highest self through the sacred energetic mechanics of Kabbalistic manifestation. To learn how to use Kabbalistic manifestation to transform your life from the inside out, go to ayeletpolonsky.com or download the Manifestation Method app. Let's open the gates of manifestation together. So my family and I recently went on a 4-day retreat for Rosh Hashanah, and it turned out in the end to be absolutely incredible. But I want to share about the first night, the night that I arrived to the space, because it touched something really tender in me. It touched on my lifelong wound around belonging. We arrived at this beautiful space, and immediately I was surrounded by over 100 amazing, soulful human beings. I mean, the kind of people that you just look at and you know that these are seekers and creatives and healers and heart-centered humans. And as it turns out, almost all of them had known each other for years. They've all formed deep friendships, sisterhoods, brotherhoods, bonds, shared stories, had experiences together. So there was really this rich web of connection already in place with all of them. And then there was me. So here's the thing. Most of my Jewish community and friendships were built during the many years that I lived in Israel. So here I was basically walking in as a stranger. And the few people that I did know were very new connections. So while they were warm, yes, they were not yet that kind of like soul rooted, time woven familiarity type of bonds. And so it felt eerily like showing up to sleepaway camp as a kid. I mean, I remember this experience, right? That moment when you haven't seen your best friends in a year and finally summer comes and everyone's running into each other's arms, picking up right where they left off. Okay, but imagine in that scene, you're not a part of it. You're standing off to the side, watching the joy, the reconnection, and realizing that no one's really saving a spot for you. So needless to say, I felt really out of place. I felt awkward. I felt like an outsider. Everyone was dropping into deep conversation so quickly, and I get it. Right? When you haven't seen your people in a while, it's natural to just dive in. So no one was intentionally unkind, not at all. But also no one really slowed down to see me either, at least not the first night. And to be honest, I really don't blame them. I've probably done the same in other moments, right? So caught up in the joy of reunion that I didn't notice the new girl in the room. And so still, my old wound around belonging, it got touched, and it got touched hard, right? And then my mind, what Buddhists call the monkey mind, started to do its thing. It started to spin stories. It started to whisper doubts. Should I have come here at all? Do I belong here? What if this was a mistake? And yeah, that hurt. But here's the thing about those moments, right? The ones that feel like they crack you open just a little too wide. If you let them, they can also become portals, invitations. So that night after my kids went to sleep, I walked outside looking out at the beautiful, expansive nature, the river, and I looked under the stars and I let myself really feel it. Not bypass it, not sugarcoat it, not scroll it away, but to feel the ache of being in a room full of people and still feeling somewhat invisible. And in that quiet, I whispered something I didn't even know at the time that I needed to say out loud. And I said to God, I said, I want to belong without needing to prove anything. I want to be loved without having to hustle for it. And then I paused and I asked myself, okay, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's a time to plant seeds of possibility and get really clear on what it is I'm stepping into for the upcoming year. So I asked myself, what would it look like to stay open anyways? And the next morning, something drastic shifted. Right? Not because the circumstances changed necessarily, right? Most people were still in their familiar circles. They still knew everyone for many years. I was still the newbie. But I started softening. I accessed the God inside of me, the place where belonging never ceases to exist, that place where I belong to my Creator. And I let my energy come from there versus letting my energy start outside of me, right? And I stopped looking for belonging in the eyes of everybody else. And I started looking for it in my own heart, in my breath, in my ability to slow down, in my ability to feel my center, my solar plexus, the center of my power and strength. I started to feel it in the micro movements, the ways that the sunlight moved across the trees. And I would look for God in everything instead of looking for attention from everyone. And something surprising happened. It was like the more I relaxed into just being me, the more magnetic I became, the more open-hearted people became. Right? The more people started to slowly get curious. Oh, who is this woman? And let's drop in. And I'm not saying it came on like an avalanche. It wasn't necessarily instant, but there were so many moments. A deep conversation on a walk, sitting next to the exact person that I needed to sit next to at dinner in order to find a new soul sister, which thank God I did, right? It would be an unexpected laugh during lunch or a vulnerable share in a circle. And slowly, threads began to weave. And by the end of the retreat, I didn't just feel like an outsider trying to fit in. I felt that I was in it. Still new, still finding my place, and that's okay because I no longer questioned whether I had a place. Me being a new friend or an old friend became irrelevant because from that place of magnetism, people started to become curious, and then the bonds started to form. And so I think sometimes belonging isn't about being immediately welcomed into the center of the circle. Sometimes it's simply about choosing to stand in your own center and trusting that with time and tenderness, connection will find you there. So let's unpack first how the belonging wound whispers messages deep into our bones. Right? Messages like, I don't belong, I'm different, I'll never truly fit in, everyone else likes her, but not me. What's wrong with me? The whole shebang, right? And this isn't just a thought. It's deeper than that. It's a feeling. It's an ache. It's a vibration in the body. And it can settle in the nervous system quite early in life, right? It shapes how we relate to others, how we relate to ourselves, how mom and dad relate to us, and how we even relate to the creator. And so it can show up as the little girl at the lunch table who watches other kids laughing and seeing their insides jokes just flowing like water while she sits on the edge of the circle thinking, why can't I be like them? What's wrong with me? It shows up as the teenager who carefully has to edit and micromanage and adjust her personality because she thinks that's what people want of her. And so she hides the parts of her that are quirky and vulnerable, right? The soulful parts of herself, all in a attempt to be accepted. She learns that if I reveal who I really am, they might leave me. So it's better to stay small and agreeable and invisible. And it shows up as the adult who walks into a work meeting or a family dinner or even a community gathering and suddenly feels like an imposter. And so the nervous system tightens and the inner dialogue whispers, I'm not supposed to be here. They're going to find out that I don't really belong. And even more painfully, it can show up on the spiritual path, right? You might find yourself sitting in meditation, in prayer, in ceremony, at synagogue, or looking around and thinking, everyone else seems so connected to God, to spirit, to source, but not me. Maybe I'm not worthy of belonging to the divine. Maybe the gates of heaven are open to everybody else, but not me. And this is the essence of the belonging wound. It's a fracture in the deep knowing that you are part of the whole. That inner knowing that we are part of the whole becomes fractured. And so let's unpack this even a little bit more deeply, okay? And really stick with me because this next part gets pretty profound, okay? So the belonging wound doesn't always shout. It whispers softly, persistently, from somewhere deep in our bones. It whispers, I don't belong, I'm different, I'll never truly fit in. And here's the thing, it isn't just a passing thought. It's not something you can just like positive vibe your way out of. It is a feeling, it is a cellular ache, and it lives in the nervous system. And it shapes the way we enter rooms. It shapes how we speak. It shapes how we shrink, how we try to prove, how we scan for safety. And it then becomes the lens that we see the world through, right? Often without even realizing it. Right? And so what makes this wound so tricky is that it doesn't always scream, right? It often shows up as subtle behaviors like over-explaining yourself or withdrawing when things get too intimate or feeling really awkward in social settings, or chasing relationships that feel just out of reach, right? Or it shows up as putting on masks depending on who you're interacting with, right? Or feeling more at home in solitude when you're alone versus when you're in connection. And not because you prefer being alone, but because it feels safer than risking rejection. Okay, so does this sound familiar? Right? If so, which I'm sure it does, it's because the belonging wound isn't a personal issue. It is a collective one. And many of us are walking around carrying this silent ache, right? Trying to earn our place in the room, in our communities, in our families, right? But here's the truth. And it's a truth that takes time to really be felt in your bones. And that is that you already belong. Right? Not because you've done enough or haven't done enough, not because you've finally proven yourself. You belong because you're here, because you exist, right? Because you are a unreplicable expression of life itself, right? And let's take this even deeper, okay? Because here's where it gets really profound. And this is something that one of my shamans really, like when he first shared this with me, it like opened my eyes to this core wound and where it comes from. And it just started to make so much sense. And it allowed my system to soften because I was just like, oh, this is part of the design, divine design. And so here's the thing. Belonging, the wound around belonging rather, is not random. It's not just something that happened because of a hard childhood or because of a social dynamic or because of that moment you were rejected in middle school, right? Although, yes, all of those experiences do just reinforce it. But really, the belonging wound begins much earlier. It begins on the level of soul, okay? So here, bear with me here, because you see, before we came into these bodies, we were in a complete state of uninterrupted oneness with Source. We existed as pure consciousness. We were unified with Source, with the Creator, with divine love itself. Hi, Ayelet here. I just wanted to pop in and say I am so excited to officially introduce the Manifestation Method portal, membership, and app. This is your home for all things Kabbalistic manifestation. You'll get access to my monthly live workshops, soul deep hypno activations and attunements, all of our manifestation courses, and our global community of manifestors. And the best part? It's just $26 a month. That's less than a latte a week. Come manifest alongside me and start creating the life you desire and deserve. Head over to ayeletpolonsky.com to join us. And there, in that space, there's no separation. There's no ego. There's no need to say, look at me, notice me, I'm special, I promise. No, there's no fear in that space. It is just a timeless ocean of connection, of wholeness, of belonging. But then something extraordinary happens, right? We are conceived in our mama's bellies. And in that moment of conception, our soul chooses to take form. It chooses this life. It chooses this mother, this human experience. And for a while, the oneness continues. But now it continues through a new vessel, our mother. And so inside the womb, we are still not separate, right? There's no me and her. There's no duality. We don't know where our body ends and mom's body begins, right? We are nourished by her breath, her food, her heartbeat, her nervous system. It is in many ways a continuation of that union with God, only now it's expressed through union with the feminine, with the earthly, with the mother. And we are not with our mother in this state. We are our mother in this state, right? Just the same as a leaf is part of a tree, we grow inside our mothers as though we were simply an extension of her body, kind of like an organ that she is momentarily growing within herself. And this womb space is our first home. It's warm, it's familiar, it's safe, it's whole. We are completely, totally, 100% supported and taken care of. But then comes the rupture, our first trauma, birth. That moment that we are pushed from the womb, out of the warm, fluid world we've always known, and pushed into cold air, harsh lights, noise, separation. So our first breath is also our first primal scream. And suddenly the oneness is gone. We are no longer one with. We are now apart from. We are now I and other. And we have officially entered in this state the world of duality, the experience of being separate from what we love, from what created us, from the source we once rested so completely inside. And whether or not we remember it consciously, our nervous system never forgets. That initial rupture becomes a kind of soul imprint or a blueprint. It is the beginning of the longing. It is the beginning of the ache. It is the search. And so we spend the rest of our lives, often unknowingly, trying to get back to that place of union. Right? I see it in my kids, right? My firstborn came into a world where he had that first initial separation of coming out of my body. And then even when he was born, he was the firstborn. So all eyes were on him. He still got all of mama's love and attention and care. And then his baby sister was born. And it's like that primal need for connection with his creator, with source, was threatened. And so I've seen how ever since his baby sister was born, as much as he loves her and they're best friends and their relationship is so yummy, I can see this nervous system imprint play out for him, right? In those moments where she might be getting more attention. And then he's doing his little dance at trying to get my attention away from her and onto him. Because in that space of he was one with me, and then now he's born into this world where it's this thirst for that unification, that oneness with source to return. And that's what's behind our deep craving for deep love. It's what's behind our desire to find a soulmate. It's the reason why we keep scanning rooms for connection, right? It's why we crave community and why spiritual practice calls to us in such a deep way, right? And it's why even in the happiest of moments, we sometimes still feel like something's missing, right? We may have manifested our soulmate. We might be in what we consider to be a happy marriage, yet something feels like I just long for more, right? And that's because at the root of the belonging wound is the core soul memory that I once belonged to everything, and now I feel apart from it. And this is where the mother wound comes in, right? Because after birth, the closest thing we have to union with the divine is our mother. It's her body, it's her gaze, her love, her presence. These become our new version of oneness, of safety, of home, of familiarity. And the truth is, for all of us, I speak when I say that our mothers are human. They are imperfect. They are not God. They carry their own wounds, their own pain, their own unmet needs, right? And so if for whatever reason her love felt inconsistent or anxious or absent, right? If she couldn't fully attune to us, if she was overwhelmed or checked out or depressed or afraid, then that early union we needed in order to feel safe in this world was disrupted. Right? And then the message that our body received was, love is not safe, connection is not guaranteed, and I have to do something in order to earn it. Right? And that's when the core wound of belonging starts to crystallize, right? We learn how to perform, to please, to hide, to chase, right? We learn that being too much or not enough gets us pushed out of the circle. We learn to earn love or to stop trusting it entirely. right? And then we grow up and we find ourselves in adult bodies and marriages and friendships and spiritual communities, still chasing that original feeling of being held, of being completely known and still completely loved, right? Of being safe in someone's gaze, or of being welcomed without conditions. And so we long to be seen, but yet we're terrified of it, right? We crave intimacy, but we flinch when it gets too close. You know, we yearn for community, but secretly believe that we'll be rejected if we bring our whole selves into it. And so we end up living in this like really sacred and also kind of like heartbreaking dance that of like, please see me, but not too much. Please love me, but don't leave. Please let me belong, but only if it's safe. And it's so real, it's so existential, and it's so like relevant, right? And that's why the journey of healing the belonging wound is so much more than just finding your people. So much more than just finding your people. Healing the belonging wound is a return. It's a spiritual return to the truth that you never actually stopped belonging, ever, not for a second. That the love you were separated from was never gone. It just got covered by fear, by trauma, by life. And really, every time you soften, every time you let yourself be seen a little more, and every time you sit with your inner child and remind her or him that they're enough, every time you open your heart to spirit, even if it feels scary, you are moving closer to that original wholeness, and you're healing the illusion of separation. Okay, and let's actually take this conversation even a little bit deeper. I know we keep going a little deeper and deeper and deeper, but I just feel like this topic is so important. And, you know, we go into this topic thinking like, oh no, this is depressing. I have this core wound and it's just existential. And like, really, it feels like there's nothing I can do about it. But you know what? This is like all by design, and it's so beautiful and it is so perfect. Right? Because the belonging wound is not just psychological, and it isn't just relational. It's spiritual. It is archetypal. It is a pattern written into the very architecture of creation itself, right? Because Kabbalah teaches that before you were born, you know, before any of us were born, our souls were immersed in the Ain Sof, in the infinite, right? Like I said, there was no you and me. No self and other, just endless, uninterrupted oneness, pure divine light, infinite connection, right? And then comes the great mystery, the soul's descent, right? To experience life, to fulfill its tikkun, its soul correction, your purpose, the soul must leave that state of undifferentiated unity and choose embodiment in a physical flesh and blood body. And so it enters time, it enters form, it enters you. And this descent from soul to body echoes one of the deepest teachings of Kabbalah, and that is the story of the Shvirat HaKelim, or the shattering of the vessels. So at the very beginning, the infinite light poured itself into vessels designed to hold it. So imagine these vessels holding God's light. But imagine God's light, right? It is so big. This light is so abundant, so powerful that the vessels just could not contain it. So they shattered. And the light then scattered. And what was once upon a time seamless, luminous whole became fragments, became sparks of divine light hidden inside matter. Right? And we call this matter klipot. So sparks of divine light shatters and becomes hidden inside of klipot, these shells or husks that conceal the sacred within. And so Kabbalah says that all of creation exists inside this story, right? It's not just a myth that happened once upon a time. It is literally the metaphysical blueprint for why we feel fractured, why we experience a fracturing from self-energy, why we have parts of ourselves that we've exiled, why we as a whole sometimes feel exiled, and why we ache for home. It's that primordial shattering that is the root of all of our wounds, right? Including the wound of belonging. So when you feel separate from your community, from your own body, from God, you're not doing life wrong. In fact, you are not alone, right? You're experiencing the core drama of all of existence. Welcome to the screenplay, right? The klipot, the shells that conceal the light, whisper their illusions to you that say, you're outside, you're not part of the whole, you're different, unworthy, cut off, right? Even in your most lost, disconnected state, you are still held inside of the infinite. You are a spark of that original light, temporarily wrapped in shells, but never actually severed from it. And so, in other words, the wound of belonging is not a sign of your defectiveness. It's rather the very curriculum of this world. You know, you were born into separation so that we could learn the deepest truth of all. And that is that separation is the biggest illusion. So when you long for connection, you are feeling the echo of your soul's original home. And when you reach for love, for community, for God, you're actually participating in the great work of creation. You are doing the sacred job of gathering the scattered sparks, of mending the shattered vessels, and reweaving this tapestry that looks like it's all duality into one greater unified whole. Right? And this is also what Kabbalah calls tikkun olam, or the repairing of the world. But tikkun olam, repairing of the world, doesn't start with how do I heal planet Earth. No, it starts with tikkun hanefesh, the repairing of your soul. And so every time you soften into your own heart, every time you pause when you're in an uncomfortable situation and you remember, I belong. Every time you offer kindness to yourself or to another, you are literally lifting sparks. You are peeling back the shells and you are participating in the healing of creation itself. And that is the most sacred work, right? This is the deeper invitation of the belonging wound. It's about remembering in the very cells of your being that I was never actually outside to begin with. I am inside the cosmic womb of the Creator as we speak. Right? So I am a fragment of divine light walking home to remembering myself, right? And that is holy, that is sacred, that is deep. So, you know, how does this wound show up in adulthood? Right? You might see it show up in relationships by overgiving, overpleasing, betraying your own needs. The belonging wound often says, if I don't perform, if I don't shrink myself, I'll lose love. And that's how it shows up in relationships. But it also shows up in community, right? You might join a group or some sort of community and always feel like you're just outside, just on the margins. Right? You might even leave that community before giving yourself a real chance to be woven in because the fear of rejection feels greater than the hope of connection. You might experience this wound in work or leadership, right? You might second guess yourself or over explain yourself or constantly hustle for credibility because there's a voice that says, they'll find out I don't belong here and that I'm an imposter, right? When this wound is, or when it's left unhealed, right? The behaviors that we develop to cope with it can be subtle but powerful, right? It looks like withdrawing when intimacy gets too close, right? Or wearing masks or adjusting yourself depending on the room you're in, right? Or it looks like choosing relationships that are just out of reach so that the longing for belonging never resolves. It just repeats itself, right? Like attracting man after man who is not ready to commit. Right? There's something to be said about that pattern. Or we might avoid communities altogether and just you end up convincing yourself that you just prefer to be alone when really deep down you're just maybe just a little terrified of being rejected. And this stuff is it's so profound because the truth is that belonging is not something you have to earn. It's your birthright. You belong simply because you exist. Right? You belong, according to Kabbalah, because your soul is a spark of the divine, carved from the infinite. right? How could you not belong when your essence is part of God? And so healing begins with awareness, noticing when old patterns arise and naming it, right? This is my belonging wound speaking, not my truth, right? It continues with doing somatic repair and bringing safety over and over again into the nervous system and allowing the body to feel what it's like to belong, even if it's in small doses. Right? And it expands with community. It's finding the courage to enter into settings, groups, containers where you can show up and feel like you can take the masks off, at least some of the masks, and be met with love and curiosity and acceptance, right? And so imagine if instead of trying to earn belonging, you actually started doing the work of embodying it, doing this work from the inside out. Right? Imagine if every time you felt like an outsider, you used it as an invitation to root more deeply into the knowing, I belong because I am. And, one of the paradoxes of belonging or the wound of belonging is that when we feel like we don't belong, we often try to compensate by chasing specialness, right? Specialness says that if I stand out enough, if I look good enough, if I impress them, if I get their acknowledgement and attention, then I'll finally feel like I matter. That's when I'll belong, right? But specialness is always outwardly sourced. It depends highly on validation, approval, comparison. That need to be seen as special is incredibly fragile. And it really makes us contort ourselves into versions we think other people want. And so it keeps us in a perpetual loop of striving and hustling and polishing and presenting. And at its core, specialness is fear dressed up as confidence. It is the ego's attempt to fill the void of not belonging. And here's the illusion, here's the truth, is that specialness never actually satisfies. Because no matter how many people admire you or applaud you or put you on a pedestal, the belonging wound still whispers, wait a minute, do they really love me? Do I really belong? Or do they just love the mask that I'm wearing? Whereas the invitation is to shift from specialness to uniqueness. Because uniqueness is completely different, right? Knowing you're unique is something sacred. Uniqueness does not strive, doesn't hustle for worthiness. Uniqueness simply is, right? Because uniqueness knows that no one ever in all of eternity that has ever existed or that will ever come to exist will ever be me. I am a one-of-a-kind, unique design. And so uniqueness is the quiet, unshakable knowing that you are one of a kind, right? Not because you're better than anyone else and not because you're standing above the crowd, but because in the entire history of existence, there literally will be no one like you. No one will have your laugh, your tears, your gifts, your scars, your soul's frequency, your fingerprint, your voice. You are utterly unrepeatable, right? And so from that space, that shift of I acknowledge my uniqueness, you no longer require validation because it's not about how others see you. It's about how you come to know yourself. It is about recognizing that your essence, as it is, carries intrinsic worth. There is no amount of doing, accomplishing, proving that can ever take away your uniqueness. You simply are because you exist, right? And that is just so, that was like an initiation for me in my life, that when I realized that paradigm shift, that reframe, so much began to soften and change for me. Right? Because when we're trapped in specialness, belonging then feels conditional. I'll only belong if I perform or I impress or I achieve or I look the part. Yeah? In Kabbalistic language, uniqueness is your own personal chelek Elokai mimal, your piece of God above. And each soul is a facet of the infinite. And that's how much you matter. That's how deeply you belong. Right? And so the medicine is this: stop striving to be special and start resting in your uniqueness, right? Specialness separates while uniqueness integrates, right? Specialness asks, do they see me? While uniqueness declares, I see myself. I know who I am. I belong. So When I went to that retreat for Rosh Hashanah, full circle, right? The one I shared about earlier, I realized something really profound. The thing that got me back to my center wasn't that someone suddenly invited me into their group or that the external dynamics shifted drastically. The thing that saved me was how I chose to meet my own discomfort. I became the witness. I didn't push the discomfort away, and I didn't let it take me over. Instead, I watched myself. I noticed how my body was tightening, how my thoughts were spinning, how my heart was aching, but I didn't fuse with it. I didn't let the discomfort define me or label me as bad or less than or not enough. I simply just watched. And in that moment of watching, something opened. It was a space, a breath, a subtle but unmistakable shift. I wasn't just a yell at feeling awkward at a retreat anymore. I became awareness itself, holding the experience, right? I was the sky and the discomfort was just the clouds passing through. And here's the thing. When I accessed the witness, I accessed God. In fact, I recently heard a rabbi teach something that felt like a lightning bolt of truth. He said that the witness inside of you is not just godly, it is God. And think about that for a moment. The pure awareness that watches your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, the one that's always been there since you were a child, since before you had words, that awareness isn't just a tool of spirituality. It is spirit. It is the divine. It is the unchanging presence of Source looking out through your eyes. And this is why when I find myself in situations where my belonging wound gets activated, I don't try to fix or force it anymore. I just come back to that God particle within. And I remember that even here in this uncomfortable moment of duality, the separation is an illusion, right? Because the reality is I can never be separate from Source because Source is me, right? In every moment, every interaction, every emotion, God is there, right? The ache, that's God. The loneliness, that's God too. The beauty, the laughter, the awkwardness, the stillness, God. And when I remember that, not just as an idea, but as a living experience, something happens, right? The ache softens, the panic slows, the inner child exhales, and I remember who I truly am. And the moment I remember that, the whole room changes. Not because anyone else behaves differently, but because I am no longer exiled from myself. I've returned to the only belonging that can never be taken away. The belonging that is already, always, eternally mine. So I want to leave you with this. The wound of belonging is universal. Every human soul carries it. But the medicine is remembering. Remembering that you belong because you are, because you carry light, because you are part of the divine story. And you don't have to earn it. You don't have to shape shift for it. You don't have to achieve anything. Belonging is your birthright. So the next time that whisper comes and says, I don't fit in, I'm different, I don't belong, I invite you to place a hand on your heart and remind yourself, I belong to Source. I belong to life. I belong to myself. I belong everywhere my soul is sent. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to come join me inside the Manifestation Method membership. It's where we take all the information that I load in my podcast episodes and we unpack it and we make it an embodied experience. It's where we go in and offer tools and live workshops and coaching calls and new moon sessions. And there is a community chat that I come in personally and I answer all of your questions there. There are hypnoactivations, hypnosis processes, neuro-linguistic programming, meditation, visualizations, you name it, the best of almost 2 decades of doing this work. And it is my gift to you. And I say gift because I've really attempted to make this membership so affordable that nobody feels turned away. Right? And I really hope to see you there because that's where the real integration work lives. and I'd love for you to be part of my community. So if you feel called, if now is the time, please introduce yourself inside the Manifestation Method membership. The link is in the show notes of this episode. That's the end of this episode, my loves. Thank you for joining me into this deep territory. May you remember your belonging this week in a new and embodied way. I love you, and here's to your rising. If you enjoyed this episode, let's keep the conversation going inside the Manifestation Method Portal app, your #1 destination for Kabbalistic manifestation. Inside, you'll unlock the secrets of manifestation through my proven Abra method, rooted in Kabbalah, psychology, and quantum physics, designed to help you manifest real, tangible results from the inside out. Join our global community of manifestors, explore our signature courses, monthly live manifestation workshops with me, Ayelet, and access our transformational hypno activations and attunements to rewire limiting beliefs and align with your soul's purpose. The app is available now on the Apple App Store and Google Play. To sign up, head over to ayeletpolonsky.com. Becoming a co-creator with the Creator is your birthright. Let's manifest the life you desire and deserve together.